Ethan Carter sat at a corner table in one of New York City's most exclusive restaurants. It was a place where people came not just to eat, but to be seen. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft light over white linen tablecloths and sparkling silverware. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, carrying trays loaded with gourmet dishes that smelled like perfection. But Ethan wasn't there for the food or the ambiance. He rarely dined out these days, preferring solitude in his penthouse apartment. Tonight, however, he had felt the need to step outside his usual routine. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the red wine in his glass without taking a sip. His mind wandered, drifting through memories he usually kept locked away. Work had always been his escape, a way to bury himself in something productive when life got too heavy. Building his tech empire had consumed him for years, and it paid off handsomely. At 42, he was worth billions, known worldwide for his innovative ideas and ruthless efficiency, yet none of it filled the emptiness inside him. Success didn't heal old wounds, no matter how hard he tried to convince himself otherwise. As Ethan glanced around the room, his eyes landed on someone who made time seem to stop. A waitress, probably in her late 50s, was moving between tables with practiced ease. There was something familiar about her kind face, the way she smiled warmly at each customer, the quiet grace in her movements. For a moment he thought he might be imagining things. After all, it had been decades since he'd last seen her. But then she turned slightly, and he caught a glimpse of her profile. That was when certainty hit him like a wave. Rachel Meyer, his childhood nanny. Ethan froze, staring at her as if seeing a ghost. Memories flooded back, vivid and unbidden. He remembered being 7 years old, standing beside Rachel as she taught him how to tie his shoelaces. He remembered her reading bedtime stories to him, her voice soothing after another long day spent missing his parents. They had died in a car accident when he was young, leaving him alone in a world that suddenly felt cold and overwhelming. Rachel had stepped in, becoming more than just a caregiver. She became his anchor, his guide, and sometimes even his friend. But eventually their paths diverged. Life happened. When Ethan turned 18, he left home to pursue his dreams, determined to make something of himself. By the time he achieved success, Rachel was already gone, having moved on to other jobs and other families. He never forgot her, though. How could he? She had shaped him in ways he only fully understood now, years later. Ethan watched as Rachel picked up empty plates from a nearby table, chatting briefly with the diners before heading toward the kitchen. Her steps were steady, but there was a weariness in her posture that tugged at his heart. What had her life been like since they last saw each other? Had she found happiness? Or had fate dealt her the same harsh blows it so often handed to good people? Before he realized what he was doing, Ethan stood up. His legs carried him across the room, drawn by an invisible thread. As he approached her, nerves fluttered in his stomach. What would he say? Would she even recognize him after all these years? He stopped a few feet away, waiting until she turned around. When she did, her brow furrowed in confusion. Clearly, she didn't know who he was, at least not right away. "Can I help you?" she asked politely, her tone tinged with curiosity. Ethan cleared his throat, suddenly unsure of himself. "Rachel, it's me, Ethan." Her expression shifted instantly, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Ethan," she repeated softly, her voice trembling. Then slowly a smile spread across her face. "Oh my goodness, look at you." For a moment neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other, bridging the gap of years in silence. Finally, Rachel laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. "I can't believe it's really you. You've grown into such a handsome man." "And you haven't changed a bit," Ethan replied, meaning every word. Despite the lines on her face and the streaks of gray in her hair, Rachel still radiated the same warmth and kindness he remembered. She glanced down at her apron, self-conscious for the first time. "Well, I'm sure I don't look quite the same as I did back then." "You look amazing," Ethan said firmly. "Really?" They stood there awkwardly for a moment, both aware of the gulf of time and experience separating them. Ethan wanted to ask so many questions, to know everything about her life, but he didn't want to overwhelm her. Instead, he gestured toward his table. "Would you like to sit down for a minute, just to catch up?" Rachel hesitated, glancing over her shoulder at the busy dining room. "I'm working right now." "I'll wait," Ethan insisted. "Whenever you're done, please." Something in his tone must have convinced her because she nodded. "Okay, give me half an hour." True to her word, Rachel joined him 30 minutes later, slipping into the chair opposite him. She looked tired but happy, her eyes bright with curiosity. "So," she began, folding her hands on the table, "what brings you here tonight?" Ethan shrugged, trying to play it casual. "Just needed a change of scenery, I guess. I didn't expect to see you." "Me neither," Rachel admitted. "This isn't exactly the kind of place I'd expect to run into anyone from my past." "No, I suppose not," Ethan agreed. He studied her carefully, noting the subtle signs of fatigue in her expression. "How have you been, Rachel?" "Really?" She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It's been a journey, let's say. Life hasn't always been easy, but I've managed. What about you? Last I heard, you were taking the business world by storm." "That's one way to put it," Ethan said with a small laugh. "But success doesn't mean much if you don't have anyone to share it with." Rachel tilted her head, studying him thoughtfully. "You sound like you've been carrying a lot on your shoulders." "Maybe I have," Ethan admitted. "But seeing you again, it feels like coming home in a way." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Rachel reached across the table, placing a hand over his. "Whatever you're going through, Ethan, I'm glad our paths crossed again. Maybe this is exactly what we both needed." As they continued talking, the noise of the restaurant faded into the background. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of peace. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't let Rachel slip out of his life again. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. He couldn't stop thinking about Rachel and their unexpected reunion at the restaurant. For years, he had buried himself in work, using success as a shield against loneliness and regret. But seeing Rachel again stirred something deep inside him, memories of simpler times when kindness mattered more than achievements. He realized how much he owed her for shaping him into the person he was today. Determined to reconnect properly, Ethan sent Rachel a text message asking if she'd like to meet for coffee before her shift started. To his relief, she agreed. They decided to meet at a small cafe near the restaurant where they had first run into each other. It wasn't fancy or crowded, just a quiet place where they could talk without distractions. When Ethan arrived, Rachel was already seated at a corner table by the window. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, looking comfortable and approachable. A steaming cup of coffee sat in front of her, and she smiled warmly as Ethan approached. "Good morning," she said, gesturing for him to take the seat across from her. "Morning," Ethan replied, sliding into the chair. He ordered a black coffee from the barista and turned his attention back to Rachel. "Thank you for meeting me here. I know your schedule must be busy." "It's no trouble," Rachel assured him. "I actually needed some time to process everything after last night. Seeing you again, it brought back so many memories." Ethan nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Me too. I've thought about you often over the years, wondering how you were doing. Life took us in different directions, but I never forgot the impact you had on me." Rachel's cheeks flushed slightly at the compliment. She sipped her coffee, gathering her thoughts before speaking. "I always hoped you'd do well for yourself, Ethan. You were such a bright kid. Even back then, I could tell you were destined for great things. But life hasn't been easy for either of us, has it?" Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to share. He had spent most of his adult life hiding behind his wealth and accomplishments, avoiding vulnerability whenever possible. Yet sitting across from Rachel felt different. She had seen him at his most fragile, guiding him through the darkest days of his childhood. There was no point pretending with her now. "No, it hasn't," he admitted finally. "Success doesn't fix everything. Sometimes it just makes you realize how much you're missing. Rachel studied him carefully, her gaze full of empathy. You sound like someone who's carrying a lot of weight on his shoulders. What's been going on with you? Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Honestly, I don't even know where to start. My company keeps growing, which is great, but it feels like I'm losing myself in the process. I spend all my time working, trying to stay ahead, but I'm not sure why anymore. And then there's the loneliness. He paused, surprised at how easily the words came out. Normally, he avoided discussing personal matters, especially with people outside his inner circle. But Rachel wasn't just anyone. She had earned his trust long ago, and somehow, that trust remained intact despite the years apart. I understand, Rachel said softly. It's hard to find balance when you're constantly striving for more. But success isn't worth much if it leaves you empty inside. Her words struck a chord with Ethan. He had known that intellectually for years, yet hearing it from Rachel made it feel real in a way he couldn't ignore. That's why seeing you again feels like fate, he confessed. You reminded me of things I've forgotten, things that matter more than money or titles. Rachel smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. I wish I could say my life has been perfect since we last saw each other. Truthfully, it hasn't. After leaving your family, I struggled to find stable work. I bounced around for a while, taking whatever jobs I could get. Eventually, I settled into waitressing because it gave me flexibility to care for my mom. Ethan frowned, feeling a pang of guilt. I didn't know about your mom. How is she doing? She passed away a few years ago, Rachel replied, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. It was tough, but we had some good years together. She taught me a lot about resilience and finding joy in the little things. Ethan reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. I'm sorry, Rachel, I can't imagine how hard that must have been. It's okay, she said, squeezing his hand gently. Life throws challenges at everyone, and we do our best to keep moving forward. That's what I've tried to do. They sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. Ethan admired Rachel's strength, realizing how much he still had to learn from her. Despite the hardships she had faced, she carried herself with dignity and grace. He wanted to help her in any way he could, but he knew she wouldn't accept charity. Not someone like Rachel who valued independence above all else. Instead, an idea began forming in his mind. Rachel, I want to offer you something, he said cautiously. Not out of pity, but because I genuinely believe you have skills and insights that could make a difference in my company. Rachel raised an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. What do you mean? I've been thinking a lot about workplace culture lately, Ethan explained. How employees interact, how they feel valued or don't. You have this incredible ability to connect with people, to make them feel seen and heard. I think you could help transform how my teams work together. Would you consider coming on board as a consultant? Your perspective would be invaluable. Rachel blinked in surprise, clearly caught off guard. Me? A consultant? Ethan, I appreciate the offer, but I don't know anything about running a business. You don't need to, Ethan insisted. You already have the most important skill, empathy. Everything else can be learned. Besides, I'll support you every step of the way. She hesitated, weighing his words. Ethan could see the conflict in her eyes, the desire to seize the opportunity versus the fear of stepping into unfamiliar territory. Finally, she spoke. I'll think about it, she said. But thank you for believing in me. That means more than you know. Relieved, Ethan smiled. Take your time. No pressure. Just know that I'm serious about this and about wanting to give back to you in some small way. As they finished their coffee, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Favorite books, travel experiences, and shared memories from Ethan's childhood. By the time Rachel had to leave for work, both of them felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. For the first time in years, Ethan felt hopeful, not just for himself, but for the possibility of rebuilding a meaningful connection with someone who truly understood him. On his way home, Ethan reflected on their meeting. Rachel's presence reminded him of the values he had once held dear: compassion, humility, and gratitude. If he could bring those qualities back into his life and into his company, he might finally find the fulfillment he had been searching. For whatever happened next, one thing was certain: Rachel Meyer was about to change everything for both of them. Rachel Meyer never imagined stepping foot into a corporate office again, let alone becoming a key figure within one of the most influential tech companies in the world. Yet here she was, walking through the polished halls of Carter Technologies, feeling both excited and nervous. After much thought, she had accepted Ethan's offer to join his company as a consultant. It wasn't an easy decision. Leaving behind the familiarity of waitressing meant venturing into uncharted territory. But something about Ethan's sincerity and the chance to make a real difference had convinced her to take the leap. On her first day, Ethan personally introduced Rachel to the executive team. "Everyone, this is Rachel Meyer," he announced proudly during a brief meeting. "She'll be working closely with us to improve our workplace culture and ensure that every employee feels valued and supported." The executives exchanged curious glances, clearly intrigued by the unexpected addition to their ranks. Rachel smiled warmly, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "Thank you all for having me," she said simply. "I'm looking forward to learning from each of you." Ethan guided her to a cozy corner office that had been prepared for her use. Unlike the sleek, minimalist spaces typical of high-level executives, this room was designed with comfort in mind. Soft chairs, plants, and warm lighting gave it a welcoming vibe. "This will be your space," Ethan explained. "Feel free to decorate it however you like." "Thank you," Rachel replied, touched by the effort he'd put into making her feel at home. "It's perfect." Over the next few weeks, Rachel immersed herself in understanding the inner workings of Carter Technologies. She spent hours talking to employees at all levels, from interns to senior managers, listening to their concerns, hopes, and ideas. What she discovered surprised her. Despite the company's success, many workers felt disconnected and overworked. Burnout was common, and morale seemed low. Armed with these insights, Rachel began proposing changes aimed at fostering a healthier work environment. Her suggestions were simple yet powerful. Introduce flexible work hours, create quiet spaces for relaxation, provide mental health resources, and encourage regular check-ins between managers and their teams. At first, some executives were skeptical, worried that such measures might reduce productivity. But Rachel patiently explained how happier employees often performed better, citing examples from her own experiences as a caregiver and waitress. Ethan fully supported her efforts, trusting her instincts even when others hesitated. "Let's give it a try," he told the board during one heated discussion. "If anyone can lead us toward meaningful change, it's Rachel." Slowly but surely, Rachel's initiatives began taking shape. Flexible schedules allowed parents to spend more time with their families, while wellness programs helped employees manage stress. Managers started holding weekly meetings not just to discuss tasks, but also to connect on a personal level. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but the positive effects soon became undeniable. Employees reported feeling more engaged and motivated, productivity increased, and turnover rates dropped significantly. Even clients noticed the shift, praising the company's renewed energy and dedication to service. Word spread quickly, earning Carter Technologies recognition as one of the best places to work in the industry. For Rachel, seeing the impact of her work filled her with pride. Each success story reminded her why she had agreed to take on this role in the first place. More importantly, it reinforced her belief in the power of empathy and human connection. People weren't machines. They needed care, support, and opportunities to grow. And when given those things, they thrived. As Rachel gained confidence, so did Ethan. Watching her navigate the corporate world with grace and wisdom inspired him to rethink his own leadership style. He realized he had been too focused on results, neglecting the importance of relationships along the way. With Rachel's guidance, he started prioritizing open communication and transparency, encouraging his team to share their thoughts without fear of judgment. Their partnership blossomed, into a friendship rooted in mutual respect and admiration. They often met after work to reflect on the day's progress, sharing stories and laughter over dinner. These moments brought them closer, bridging the gap between their vastly different lives. For Ethan, Rachel represented stability and authenticity, qualities he desperately needed in his otherwise chaotic existence. And for Rachel, Ethan offered validation and purpose, reminding her that her contributions mattered far beyond the restaurant floor. One evening, as they sat together in Ethan's penthouse overlooking the city skyline, Rachel turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder if we're making too big a splash?" she asked. "People are starting to notice what we're doing here." Ethan nodded, acknowledging the growing attention surrounding their efforts. Media outlets had begun covering Rachel's journey from waitress to corporate consultant, hailing her as a symbol of resilience and reinvention. While the publicity boosted morale within the company, it also attracted criticism from skeptics, who accused Ethan of exploiting her story for profit. "I've thought about that," Ethan admitted, "but I don't think we're doing anything wrong. You're changing lives, not just here but everywhere people hear your story. That's worth celebrating." Rachel smiled softly, appreciating his optimism. Still, she couldn't shake the nagging worry that public scrutiny might overshadow their mission. "We'll have to stay grounded," she said firmly. "No matter what happens, we can't lose sight of why we started this." "You're right," Ethan agreed. "And no matter what challenges come our way, we'll face them together." With that promise lingering in the air, they returned to planning their next steps. Neither of them knew exactly where this journey would lead, but one thing was certain. Their collaboration wasn't just transforming Carter Technologies, it was reshaping their own lives in ways neither could have anticipated. As Rachel Meyer's story continued to make headlines, the attention grew harder to ignore. Articles praising her transformation from waitress to corporate consultant appeared in major newspapers and magazines. Social media buzzed with discussions about her journey, inspiring countless people who saw themselves in her struggles and triumphs. While many celebrated her success, others criticized Ethan Carter for what they called exploiting Rachel's past for publicity. The scrutiny began to weigh heavily on both of them. At first, Rachel tried to brush off the negative comments. She reminded herself that no good deed went unnoticed, and neither did any bold move. But the constant spotlight started to take its toll. She found herself questioning whether she truly belonged in this new world, or if she was simply playing a role written by someone else. Doubts crept in late at night when the noise of the day finally faded. Was she just a token figurehead, brought in to polish the company's image? Or was her work making a genuine difference? Ethan noticed the change in her demeanor almost immediately. Rachel, usually so warm and composed, seemed quieter during meetings and less enthusiastic about upcoming projects. Concerned, he invited her to lunch one afternoon to check in. They chose a small cafe away from the office, hoping for some privacy amidst the chaos. "You've been distant lately," Ethan said gently after they placed their orders. "Is everything okay?" Rachel hesitated, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I don't know, Ethan. Sometimes I feel like maybe I'm not cut out for all this. People are watching us so closely, dissecting every decision we make. What if they're right? What if I don't deserve to be here?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. "Rachel, listen to me. You've earned your place, not because of me, but because of who you are. Your ideas are changing lives, and that's something no amount of criticism can take away." "But what about the backlash?" Rachel asked. "The accusations that you're using my story for publicity. It feels like we're losing control of the narrative." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He had anticipated pushback but hadn't fully grasped how deeply it would affect Rachel. "You're right," he admitted. "We need to address this head-on. If we let the critics shape our story, then we've already lost sight of why we started this." Together they came up with a plan, a press conference where Rachel could speak directly to the public, sharing her perspective without filters or intermediaries. It was risky, opening themselves up to even more judgment, but they agreed it was necessary. Transparency, after all, was one of the values they were trying to promote within the company. The day of the press conference arrived, and Rachel stood backstage, her heart pounding. Ethan stayed by her side, offering quiet encouragement. "You've got this," he whispered. "Just be yourself, that's all anyone needs." When Rachel stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Cameras flashed, and reporters scribbled notes as she approached the podium. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "Thank you all for being here today," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "I know there's been a lot of talk about my journey, from working as a waitress to joining Carter Technologies. Some have praised it, while others have questioned my role in all of this. So I want to share my truth." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces before continuing. "Yes, I worked as a waitress for years. Yes, I faced challenges that tested me in ways I never imagined. But none of that defines me, or limits me. What defines me is how I choose to move forward. When Ethan offered me this opportunity, I didn't see it as charity. I saw it as a chance to prove that everyone deserves a second chance, to learn, to grow, and to contribute in meaningful ways." Her words resonated deeply, drawing murmurs of approval from the audience. She went on to explain how her initiatives at Carter Technologies weren't just about improving numbers. They were about creating a workplace where people felt valued and supported. "This isn't about fame or fortune," she emphasized. "It's about showing that empathy and kindness can transform lives, including mine." By the time she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Reporters rushed to ask questions, but Rachel handled each one with grace and honesty. Ethan watched from the sidelines, pride swelling in his chest. He knew this moment would define not only their partnership but also the future of their mission. In the days following the press conference, public perception shifted dramatically. Critics softened their tone, acknowledging Rachel's authenticity and the tangible impact of her work. Employees at Carter Technologies rallied around her, inspired by her courage and determination. Even competitors began adopting similar initiatives, recognizing the value of prioritizing employee well-being. For Ethan, the experience reinforced the importance of humility and accountability. He realized that leadership wasn't about controlling outcomes. It was about empowering others to shine. With Rachel's guidance, he stepped back from the spotlight, allowing her to lead independently. Together, they launched a foundation aimed at providing education and career resources to underserved communities. The goal was simple: to give others the same opportunities Rachel had received. As they unveiled the foundation's first community center weeks later, surrounded by grateful beneficiaries and supporters, Ethan and Rachel reflected on how far they'd come. Their reunion had sparked a ripple effect, touching countless lives and proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could reshape destinies. And so two souls, once separated by circumstance, found themselves united, not only by shared history but also by a shared future. Guided by compassion and driven by purpose, they prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together. Months had passed since Rachel Meyer and Ethan Carter launched their foundation, and now they stood together at the grand opening of its first community center. The building was modest but vibrant, painted in bright colors that reflected hope and possibility. Inside, classrooms were equipped with computers, books, and supplies, ready to welcome anyone eager to learn or improve their skills. Outside, families gathered, excited to see what this new resource could offer their community. As Rachel held the oversized scissors alongside Ethan to cut the ceremonial ribbon, she felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Pride, gratitude, and a deep sense of purpose mingled in her heart. This moment wasn't just about opening a building. It was about creating opportunities for people who might otherwise be overlooked. For Rachel, it represented everything she had worked toward, a chance to give back and make a lasting impact. Ethan glanced at her, noticing the tears glistening in her eyes. "You okay?" he whispered softly, his voice barely audible over the applause from the crowd. "I'm perfect," Rachel replied, her smile radiant. "This is what it's all about." After the ribbon cutting, They led a tour of the facility, introducing guests to the various programs available. There were classes on coding, financial literacy, resume writing, and even wellness workshops focused on mental health. Volunteers bustled around, greeting visitors and answering questions. Children played in a designated area, their laughter filling the air. It was clear that this place wasn't just a building, it was a hub of hope and transformation. Later, as the event wound down, Ethan and Rachel found themselves standing near the entrance, watching the last few attendees leave. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. They had achieved something remarkable, and yet neither of them felt the need to say much. Sometimes, silence spoke louder than words. "You know," Ethan began after a while, breaking the quiet, "I never imagined my life turning out like this." Rachel raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" He chuckled lightly, shaking his head. "When I started my company, I thought success would fix everything. I chased money and recognition, thinking it would fill the void inside me. But none of that mattered until I reconnected with you. You reminded me of the values I'd forgotten: compassion, humility, and the importance of human connection." Rachel smiled, touched by his honesty. "And you gave me a second chance to do something meaningful with my life. I never dreamed I'd end up here, helping others in ways I never thought possible." They stood there for a moment, reflecting on how far they'd come. Their journey hadn't been easy. There had been doubts, challenges, and moments when failure seemed inevitable. But through it all, they had leaned on each other, finding strength in their shared vision. The next day, Rachel arrived at the community center early, eager to start her workday. As she walked through the halls, she noticed a young woman sitting, alone in one of the classrooms, staring intently at a laptop. Intrigued, Rachel approached her. "Hi there," she said warmly. "Is everything okay?" The young woman looked up, startled but polite. "Oh, hi. Yes, I'm fine. Just trying to figure out how to apply for scholarships online. I want to go back to school, but I don't know where to start." Rachel pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "Well, you've come to the right place. Let me help you. Let me." Over the next hour, Rachel guided the young woman through the process, offering advice and encouragement along the way. By the time they finished, the woman's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you so much," she said. "I didn't think anyone cared about people like me." "That's why we're here," Rachel replied kindly. "To show you that someone does care, and to remind you that you're capable of achieving great things." Word spread quickly about the support available at the community center. More people began showing up, seeking guidance, training, and inspiration. Success stories poured in. One man landed a job after completing the coding course. Another woman started her own small business thanks to the entrepreneurship program. Each victory reinforced Rachel and Ethan's belief in the power of opportunity. Meanwhile, Ethan continued stepping back from the public eye, allowing Rachel to take the lead. He focused on funding expansions, ensuring the foundation could reach more communities in need. Though he still attended events and meetings, he preferred working behind the scenes, trusting Rachel's instincts and expertise. Their partnership evolved into something deeper, a friendship built on mutual respect and admiration. They spent evenings discussing ideas for future projects, brainstorming ways to tackle bigger challenges. Sometimes they simply enjoyed quiet meals together, savoring the peace that came from knowing they were making a difference. One evening, as they sat on a park bench overlooking the city skyline, Rachel turned to Ethan with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't run into each other that night at the restaurant?" Ethan smiled, considering the question. "Honestly, I think our paths were always meant to cross again. Life has a funny way of bringing people together when they need each other most." Rachel nodded, agreeing wholeheartedly. "It's strange how things work out, isn't it? A single moment can change everything. And look at us now," Ethan added. "We've transformed not only our own lives, but also the lives of countless others. That's something worth celebrating." As they sat there, surrounded by the hum of the city, they knew their journey was far from over. Challenges would undoubtedly arise, and there would be days when progress felt slow or uncertain, but they faced the future with confidence, knowing they had each other, and the unwavering belief that kindness and empathy could reshape the world. For Rachel and Ethan, this wasn't the end of a story, it was the beginning of a legacy. Together, they had proven that no matter where life takes you, the connections you forge and the actions you take can create ripples that extend far beyond what you ever imagined. And in those ripples lay the true measure of success.